Thank you for coming. You can see the title of the webinar on the screen. So if that's not what you were here to see, you're actually in the wrong place. I doubt that happens. But so we're here today. I'm CEO Marcus Popetz of 42 Lines, the creators of Harmonize. Most everything is not going to be for me today. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and hand it over to Jim. He is going to talk about online discussions, much like the title says, and how Brown views them and how it's working out in their school, etc. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Jim. Jim is the Assistant Director of Digital Learning and Design, and as we were talking about, that's sometimes hard to understand what he does, so maybe he can give you a better description of what his job actually entails as he goes. We're about 2 minutes in, so Jim, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Marcus. I will start with that. So again, I'm Jim Foley. I am the Assistant Director of Digital Learning and Design. At Brown University, what that means is my team is the one that's supporting all of the digital tools on campus. So we're a Canvas school. We have different applications for polling. We have Panopto. But my team is the one that's supporting those tools, but it also houses our instructional design staff that is helping all of the faculty integrate different technology solutions into their course. So that's what my title means, at least at Brown. We know this is a little different every institution. So, I want to start by saying, thanks for jumping on. It's great to see so many people. I hope that me sharing our experiences at Brown, can help answer some questions, give you ideas. I also really appreciate that you've all made time to join us. This is a pretty intense time, I know, for my team, and I have to assume it is for you too. So it's greatly appreciated that you've joined us. So I'm going to slide ahead here. Oh, I just did that. I'm going to jump ahead to, this was me. We're going to jump ahead to a poll. So in terms of chatting, I just wanted to hear a little bit more about where everybody was coming from in terms of, what your interests might be, and in thinking about how I might be able to, do the best I can to cater the presentation in terms of interest. I'll let it count down. And while you're all responding to the poll, I'll also bring up, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A pod, which you'll see at the bottom in Zoom. And our friends at Harmonize are going to be paying attention to those questions, and Marcus or Heather will elevate those questions or choose to interrupt me to ask those. I know personally, I often don't want to hear the same person talking for half an hour uninterrupted. So feel free to jump in, ask questions, and they might just escalate some of those when it makes sense in the presentation. So
it was also my job. It was also my job to remind people that the chat pod is open, and I totally forgot that. So if you want to have some informal conversations, you can put them in the chat pod. If you throw a question in there and we're like, oh, that's a great Q&A for Jim, we'll have you copied over into the Q&A pod so we can more easily moderate those for him. And if you have something where you're like, no, answer this now, call that out, because we'll save them to the end sometimes we'll introduce them. But if you're like, this would be totally relevant to answer this question now, then feel free to chime in with that as well, and we'll raise it up to his awareness.
Great. It looks like we've got quite a few instructors, so welcome. And hopefully some of what I'm going to talk through in terms of how we are able to find a solution for someone might work for you. Before I jump ahead to the next slide, what I want to do is just to give you a sense for how I'm going to talk through this process that might help you decide when you want to ask questions or not. I'm going to share a little bit about, our environment, so you understand what our conditions, constraints, et cetera are, how we adopted and why we adopted Harmonize, and then how that parallel track with our typical sort of adoption and learning about tools and implementing tools is now being completely affected by COVID, and how we're reconciling that and making things work, and how we're planning on supporting things moving into the future. All right, so I'm just going to jump ahead. And I'm going to close this poll. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about Brown's open curriculum. So this is something I'm very proud of. That working at Brown, this is a very big deal, and we're, I think, the last school that has an open curriculum in the U.S. I don't know for sure right in this moment, but what this means is that this was something that took place in the 70s. It was a student-led movement where the students are actually sort of the master of their own destiny. And so this is a major situational factor for us because it creates an opt-in culture. So in terms of tool usage, courses students take, everybody's sort of forging their own path. They get to decide what courses they take. And then we don't have majors, we have concentrations. So they would work with the faculty members in those concentrations to decide the kinds of courses that they want. So this sort of cultural, this situational factor sort of extends into the way that faculty choose to use tools and teach at the same time. So they're also forging their own path. So we don't really, we don't have mandates, policies, anything that we implement across campus. Like, you don't have to use Canvas, you don't have to use Harmonize, you don't have to use anything you don't want to. But what this also means is that the onus is on our instructors to, effectively sell the course to the students, right? So if the student's choosing their own path, the instructors really have to sell the students on that class. They have to say, in that beginning of the course, to get them to stay, this is what we're going to be doing. This is what the experience looks like. And so we're trying to give, instructors the tools to make it engaging and interesting, and really get them to come back. I'm just going to move on here. So this is a very brief write-up about what this means in terms of the open curriculum. So let me just move on slides here. So I talked a little bit about this in terms of sort of being the master of your own destiny, and having to convince the students to stay in the course. And connected to that is what we have called the shopping period. So Brown has an extremely long add drop period, which is actually ending today. And that's the earliest it's ever ended. And this is because of COVID. But students typically have about 6 weeks consequence free to add or drop a course. So the first few weeks, 3, 4 weeks of the class, students can come and go freely. And in some cases are encouraged to do so by advisors, to really understand what they're going to get out of the course and to decide if this is really the path they want for their academics. So it's a major factor, and we encourage a lot of faculty to use engagement tools and other things early on to get students hooked, to get them interested and starting to work with the material, ask questions, engage. And before COVID, they were doing this face-to-face, and so we've tried to find other ways to help them do this in a digital space. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end in terms of the suite of tools that we're trying to get people to adopt to accomplish this. And then the last sort of thing that I wanted to share just for context is that we have about just shy of 7,000 undergraduate students. And so it adds up to about 900 undergrad courses. And for the size of our school, that's about proportionate, but a large proportion of those are very small. They're seminar style courses with 10 or under students, and so we typically don't go after those folks when we're trying to do the different kinds of tools. Like they're welcome to use them, but we find the biggest wins in larger enrollment courses. Okay, I'm gonna pause for 1 second, change slides, in case there, give people a chance. Questions? No. Okay. Okay, so last bit of context, my team. So I talked a little bit about this, but the digital learning and design team at Brown is a year old. We had a dedicated online team that was doing heavily produced online courses, and in those they would work in partnership with the department, or the academic department offering those online courses, or the chair to develop what the courses in the program look like, so they're the same and they're using the same tools and the interaction models similar. I absorbed those folks last year, and my former team was only doing campus support. And for us, as part of that opt-in culture, we were always ready to support people and help them integrate tools. But we'd send out reminders, we'd have a newsletter, but people really had to come to us. Nobody was forced to use anything. So we didn't drive big numbers, and the online team was a large constituent of that, because those designers are more hands-on in terms of integrating that. Now that we're all one team, that has shifted, and at least for us, this was sort of a moment that I would say saved us, because we had the designers who knew those principles of doing online engagement and online community building sort of brought into our team in a moment when we all had to move online. So it worked out really well for us. Which brings us to COVID. So because I was able to get those folks onboarded into our team, moving into early March, when we went remote, we know a lot of people went remote, we were able to get a lot of those great resources that they had developed for many years in terms of doing inclusive teaching practices, online engagement, and accessible practices in online. We were able to put that guidance together and offer it up to the whole campus. And so we have as our main sort of status, this is the Healthy at Brown site, which is where faculty can see the current status of whatever's going on. And so for Brown, moving to the fall, the decision was made in June that we would not have 100% face-to-face courses. So people had to choose to be remote, where it meant no face-to-face contact. They could do that synchronous. It was really, do your lectures on Zoom, it's okay. Or a hybrid, where a small portion of students were allowed to come back to campus to receive instruction, but they had to be able to completely accommodate students who did not come back to campus. So even the ones that had limited permission to meet on campus, they still had to accommodate fully remote students. So everybody had to be ready to full digital delivery for their courses. We also went to a 3-semester model. So that was a factor for us too, giving us a lot more lead time to help develop courses for the spring and new summer semester. So I talked a little bit about this just now, but essentially my design team was very upset, describing online learning as remote learning, but it is a fight they lost with our administration, and that's okay. So for us, at least at Brown, online learning is defined as, really fully remote, basically just no face-to-face contact. And we did this partially because, for our international students, there were a lot of concerns based on, different stuff coming from the Department of Education about what it meant to be at Brown or not. And we wanted the ability for them to register for a hybrid course to maintain their residential status. And so for us, this is our definition for hybrid learning. And another situational factor for us, we only enabled about 100 classrooms for people to get on and participate with Zoom. So this was a fairly limited amount of spaces that had the right equipment for people to do hybrid teaching, since everything had to be completely available to remote students. All right.
Jim, quick question. When
Yes.
you said you're on a 3-semester model, Christine Hoover is asking if those are defined in like the 16-week fall and spring plus a summer, or did you mean something different by a 3-week term?
Yeah, so
A 3 semester term.
we're on a 14-week semester, and we used to only have fall and spring. And so we had a 7-week summer session. So we've shifted our entire academic calendar, and now we're doing 3 14-week semesters, summer sessions canceled effectively. And the goal of that was just to reduce the amount of students physically on campus at the same time. So this academic year, students are only coming for 2 semesters like normal, but they're only going to, fall, summer, or, winter, fall, right? Like, just so that they're spread out over a larger amount of time, just as not to have them all here at the same time, reduce the risk. And I'm sure this is true for a lot of other people too. It's difficult for us to manage because we're right in the city of Providence, and so students just live in apartments. A lot of them don't go home. We can't really control whether they're around or not. But this was, for us, a way to mitigate that. Thank you for jumping in with that. That was helpful. So on to InstructureCarn. So switching gears, I wanted to talk a little bit about why we got harmonized in the first place. So, pre-COVID, if anyone else can remember that, we were adopting tools because we believed in them, and it was fun and interesting and could provide an engaging experience. And we had a lot of faculty at the time, especially in our fully online programs, they were okay with Canvas, but there was always a particular complaint about how Canvas discussions worked. And for us, there was nothing actionable, right? We were not interested in seeking out new tools. We felt it was good enough, but we registered the complaints with Canvas, just in the sense of, these things could be improved. It could work a little bit nicer. But we weren't being proactive about finding something else to meet the needs. But one of my instructional technologists attended InstructureCon in 2018, which was very unfortunately named InstructureCarn. I don't know why they didn't do InstructureVol, right? Like a carnival. Sounds nicer. And saw Harmonize, and was really pumped about the possibilities of addressing, some of the concerns we had about Canvas discussions. And I would say foremost among them, just as an example, is it's not, at least for us, it's not always obvious when you're in a threaded discussion who you're responding to. We never felt great that you had to really focus to see the alignment of who you're responding to. We had a lot of instructors confused about the dot on the left and what that means. And also that as you continue to discuss, and if it's a particularly engaging discussion, eventually that column of text is like 2 words wide when you continue to respond. So we were never pumped about this. This was always a frustration for us. And we saw Harmonize as a solution. We saw that as a way to address that issue. And at the same time, we had folks looking at other places to do their conversations, discussions, chat. And so they were turning to these kinds of solutions, right? So, Piazza has its strengths and weaknesses. For us, we noticed it was very much, not as conversation friendly. It was more like it was like Stack Overflow. Like, I have this problem, please help me fix it. Workplace is flexible, but also more challenging to learn. And groups, we had, the same complaint from Piazza. Like, it doesn't look nice. The students complained in terms of aesthetics and usability. And for the instructors, the biggest issue was assessment. While they continued, many of them continued to use the Canvas discussions because of the ease of assessment, right? You can go to the speed grader and add a grade to these conversations. If you're going to have those chats, at least for us on like WordPress groups or Piazza, if you want to grade those, you've got to dig in. You've got to get your notebook out and be like, this person wrote this thing, I'll give them an A, right? There's no LTI, there's no grade pass back. There's not a great way to do that easily. And we also found, at least in terms of tools like WordPress, which we use quite heavily, and I think I've got an example here, which I'll skip to and come back. In terms of WordPress, we would set these up. The instructors would work with my design team to configure them, and the students would engage because they were frustrated, at least in terms of like, learning the HTML rather than just having the conversation they were meant to have. So, for us, Harmonize was something that ticked all those boxes. It was easy. It was really well integrated in terms of assessment. So I'm just going to jump back a slide here. That's sort of like the one issue, and I'll jump ahead here too. This is an assessment example. So for us, being able to present this to the instructor, this is an example from one of our archaeology courses. It's really easy to see how many posts that people have made, the comments. You can leave overall comments on the right about the assignment, put the grade there, and it was a huge time saver, especially with large enrollment courses, which is one of the groups they want to target. So we can see the kinds of engagement they're doing and still be able to assess it pretty easily instead of sifting through a lot of comments in WordPress. So that leads me to the second scenario, which was multimedia assignments. So the same example, at the time I was directly supporting our Hispanic Studies department, and they were one of our heaviest users of WordPress. And so what they were doing with this is they were asking students to essentially do photo essays. And you can see all the different topics there at the top. So every semester they would sit down with a designer. For a long time it was me. And we would put these templates together, and I would go to the course. I would train the students on how to actually make the posts, how to organize WordPress, how to do all of that. And then the students would do it, and in the end, it often looked really nice. But we found that the hurdle of actually getting the content and developing this was a distraction and a frustration from the actual course material. And the students were talking to each other. They were spending all of their time, wringing their hands on learning WordPress. So, it was always like an aesthetics trade-off. And we really needed something that would allow students to do, meaningful posts and response about podcasts, about photo essays, about videos that they might have done. So we realized after adopting Harmonize for something else that it would allow us to do that. That we could basically make this our default recommendation for people who wanted to do those kinds of assignment types, because Harmonize lets you just drag that content in, organize it the way you'd like, and write any supplemental information that you wanted about in a post, and then respond. And having a tile view, at least in terms of like the photo essays, pretty closely emulated what we were doing with those WordPress blogs. So it was definitely a win for us in terms of moving them. So our course sequences, were sort of, I think it was 200, 300, and 400 level for Hispanic Studies. So I worked with those instructors to help slowly migrate all of their lessons into using Harmonize instead. And we noticed that a lot less complaints. The students were able to figure it out on their own. We didn't have to do trainings like we did with WordPress, but also that they were actually commenting on each other. And they were responding, with like thumbs ups and, actually starting conversations, which was part of the goal, because at least in Hispanic Studies, they're supposed to be practicing language. So doing the bare minimum in terms of responding is not good. Like, that's not what we were looking for.
I'm curious, when you were doing the Hispanic Studies things, were you using the audio record video feature to do that, or were you how were they doing the language practice side of things? And maybe orthogonal to what you're talking about here, so feel free to
No, that's fine. So that's also part of it too. You know, we noticed a lot of students were using the built-in recording. It's kind of a mixed scenario for us because we have a team that teaches students how to create their own media. So um, we would have them meet with that person to learn how to do a podcast. So they would get a training on, like, you know, how to go out and do field recording, do an interview with their abuela, and then post that, a translation of that where they edited it, you know, in something like Adobe Audition. So so in those cases, no, but we actually found that in those cases, the instructors are responding with the built-in recording, and they really like doing that because, you know, something like if you're doing it in WordPress, you have to record on something else and then upload it, right? So they loved that they could also respond and comment, you know, because the students had put together a fairly tightly edited, you know, tool, but it was really nice for the instructors to be able to respond with audio comments. That's a great question. Um, all right, so I'm just gonna move on here into the present. So this model worked, the one I was just describing, and I was able to migrate Hispanic studies. We have some archaeology folks. As I just showed you, we have a great course called the Pyramids in Context, where the instructor in the spring, before COVID, was teaching remotely anyway from Egypt, from the pyramids, that we had a great experience with Harmonize with. And we're also slowly moving some of the other languages in there as well, because they also appreciate the conversational format. And this all kind of happened through the spring and over the past 2 years. We were slowly getting a class here and there to adopt it. But then COVID hit, and my team was solely responsible for helping, you know, these 600 courses go online or remote. And so we responded as quickly as we could in terms of just sort of putting out fires in the spring, but we realized we might have an opportunity for the fall and going forward to really get people the principles of doing online engagement. And so we launched, in partnership with our new colleagues in a teaching and learning center, this Course Design Institute. So it's based on, you know, sort of evidence-based practices. The typical thing you would get in a week-long, you know, institute with as far as like building a syllabus and fleshing out a course. But we focused on, you know, inclusivity, digital, you know, like community building and engagement practices in order to make sure that, you know, people weren't feeling isolated moving into the fall, and they understood, you know, what worked based on research, what works well in online spaces and what doesn't. So we were able to get about 2/3 of all the faculty at Brown to participate in this. And I don't think it was marketing. I mean, I think that the reality was we had a lot of nervous folks and they wanted to be prepared. So, you know, for us, it was a really great opportunity to get people, you know, ready to go, but at the same time, to help them understand, you know, the types of practices that work and don't work in terms of community building. And for us, we wanted to model everything we were recommending. And so there was harmonized assignments in every one of these courses so that students could, you know, in this case, the students were the instructors, could see how to, you know, do this kind of community engagement by modeling the behavior. And also as part of that, in an attempt to reach the third of faculty who didn't join us, our team put together a whole suite of guides, which you are all welcome to take a look at because they're on our website, our public website. I'll put in a plug. It's dld.brown.edu. So we put together a suite of guides on online teaching and hybrid teaching because those are the only two models we support. But the secret is most of them are the same because the principles of how to engage people digitally, they hold over. So for us, we wanted to make sure that we had tool recommendations built in, right? So here's why to do community building. Here's the tool you can use to do it. And we've done our best to integrate that into our guides in terms of which tools people might want to use and why you would pick one over the other. And we prioritized ones, not just the ones that, that we've purchased and chosen to support, but an even smaller subset where we think that the largest gains will be made in terms of making your students feel inclusive, but also won't stress you out as an instructor, because that was a big thing for us too. Everyone's new to this, right? So we didn't want people to try to adopt and learn really complicated things. And we felt Harmonize is arguably the same or easier to set up than a typical Canvas discussion. Okay. So before I dig too much more into the future for us, I wanted to ask another poll question. So what are you all using or thinking about using this fall in terms of tools? It is a Harmonized webinar, but they gave me the platform, so I want to hear about it. And if while you're filling this out, if you're choosing other, if you could maybe drop in the chat what some of those were, so I can take a look. Give folks a chance.
So while we're waiting on the poll as well, if you end up having time, Jennifer Sprecher, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, is asking, could you highlight a few examples of your guidelines?
Definitely. I'm always happy to promote my team's work.
In terms of some of your other people filling out the respondents, often looks like built-in discussion. So Canvas discussion, something we use what's built into Blackboard, Blackboard Collaborate.
Yep. Okay. I see one name coach person. Shout out, big fan.
Looks like lots of Blackboard users on Blackboard Collaborate, Blackboard built-in discussions as well. What is Name Coach? I should probably know EdTech tools, but.
Well, while we still got the survey up, Name Coach is for us. We've got it integrated as an LTI, but you can use the tool in many ways. It's very simple. It basically adds a roster to your course, and students can record their own names. And for us, we've also added a custom column for students to put in their pronouns. And it's one of the sort of suite of tools for us that we want to institute in as many courses as possible to get the message to students to say, like, inclusivity is important to us. Like, we want to know who you are, and we want to respect who you are and participate. We want you to feel comfortable in this culture to say, this is how you actually say my name. These are my pronouns. Please engage with me this way. So it's a great tool. All right. It's interesting to see there's a lot of others. So that's great. Oh, BB discussion boards, Jeffrey. Yeah, we had some of those too.
Microsoft Teams was called out as well.
Yeah, I see Teams and Blackboard Collaborate. Yep. Okay. So I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second, and I'm gonna jump over to my guides, because I will take the chance to share that with everyone really quickly, since they brought it up. So the way our site is organized, we have our guides under these different resources. This is sort of the only, public facing thing that we have here. We've tried to offer a lot of, consultation hours with folks and et cetera, but we invested a lot of work into this because we realized my proportionate to the university, my design team is kind of big, I think, compared to some other universities I've worked at, but still, moving 900 courses, we can't meet with everybody. We have tried. We had hundreds of consultations this summer to help people, but there's only so many hours. So we tried to have as much good documentation as possible. In terms of featured guides, so an example for us, I'm just going to go to online. The ones that were really important for us were inclusive technology practices. We wanted to spend a lot of time talking about, so instructors understood, abstractly what the benefits of this are, but then also to read more about how they can include inclusive practices into their class. And then one of our other ones is digital inclusion and accessibility. So just to have some general practices on how people can participate in inclusive strategies. We link to a lot of resources whenever we know that there's an expert, right? So it's not all Brown. We have stuff from other universities as well on how to foster a sense of belonging from a more hands-on standpoint. These are sort of small teaching guides. We also have in our I'm just going to jump ahead to our guide on course development.
Hey, Jim, while you're jumping around,
Sure.
we're going to question, how large is your team?
Oh, okay. So I only have 2 instructional technologists. I would love more. I am asking for more. So I have to wear that hat a lot because there's only 3 of us. And that's okay. I still enjoy it. And, having that time, I have 7 designers. So there's other folks on my team that aren't directly, they do some of the student facing training, but the core team that's supporting courses, we have 7 designers. And I actually, maybe all of the schools I've worked at are under-resourced, but the last few universities I've worked at are bigger and have less designers. So to me, it seems like a good ratio. And then the last bit before I want to move on, because I want to have time for questions. So we put together these guides because we saw it coming. So, and by we, I mean my online designers. They knew the lift to put together a proper online course. So in the spring, they frantically put together these 3 different guides for the 3 different formats we have. So our fall spring is the 14-week guide. Someday I'm sure we'll go back to just fall and spring. And then our team supports pre-college courses and the summer session, which was a 7-week. And inside those guides, which many of you won't be able to look at these videos, but that's okay. The videos are just a rehash of what's written, because different modalities are great. We put together these guidelines that essentially there's a worksheet that helps people populate their 14-week course. We've included in a Canvas template that they can import into their class a lot of the information about like core services, how to do, get access to the library. We have a community engagement center that helps students work on projects that serve the Providence area. So there's a page in there about that. Accessibility services, basically we put all those services right in the template so faculty don't have to go find that and put it into their syllabus. But I've gotten 100 emails from instructors saying, thank you for putting this together because I didn't even know where to start. And so we continue to refine it, but we purposely keep it bare bones so that, faculty really can populate it with what their course is about. But at least, they have a starting point for a structure. And I can get more into this bit with in the question time, but I'm going to jump back to slides really quick because I have just really one more slide where I'm going to talk about the actual tools. Okay, screen share. So this is the suite of tools that we have focused on in terms of adopting and encouraging adoption. So the numbers from 2015 to 2018 are not perfectly accurate. Our business intelligence team, is working on cleaning that up, but the ones for the current semester are very true. So in the past 2 years, well, we've gotten about, maybe 70, 80, 90 students into Harmonize in those, in the more intensive language courses every semester. So far, as of when these numbers came from, which I think is about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, we have over 1,000 students in Harmonize already. So, we're seeing that represented as it looks like about 30, 31, 32 courses. But that tells me that our push to get these into large enrollment courses worked. Like we got Harmonize into those big classes where you can easily feel anonymous and vanish into the background. That this push worked. Those students are in, and they're discussing with each other, and so we're happy to see that. Name coach there at the top. We've got it in, looks like 43 courses. I would love to see it in all 900, but again, our opt-in culture, I won't just turn it on. And so it's always a bit of a struggle, but it means more to us, I think, that when we can convince folks to just use and integrate these tools on their own. But I think indicative, that number's not here, but like I said, we're just over 1,000 students in it. So that for us means that, between 1/6 and 1/7 of our student population is using Harmonize, which for us would have been unheard of 2 years ago. So, I think that, integrating it into our teaching institute, putting it in our guides as a recommendation, and sharing out in messages has made a difference. But I also know that our Hispanic studies folks who have had success with it are pushing it with, at least in terms of the other language faculty. They're singing its praises, right? And word of mouth between instructors is probably the most trustworthy source, we have in terms of adoption. But, based on the success, we're signed on for 3 years. We just signed the contract. We're happy with Harmonize, and we're looking forward to 3 more years of hopefully this line continuing to curve upward.
How much, Jim, how much do you have to teach your instructors about the role of like asynchronous discussions in a classroom? I know you talked about being able to preach equity and such. Like, is that already a culture that exists at your school, or is that a culture you had to work on as well?
Yeah, so the one positive thing that, it's sort of a flip side that, we don't sort of mandate any kind of tool usage for campus. And that's been true for years. And we had a Canvas at around 78, 80% adoption, which for us was good considering no one had to use it. But if we explain why, and the message gets through that this is actually really helpful, right? Have your syllabus here. If they lose the paper copy, they can get it again, right? So these slow incremental communicating changes that go out is what we think makes the difference. And so this has been true for us for Harmonize. Like, we think that going through the Anchor, Institute that we had this summer, they participated in a discussion and actually got time with the instructors of the course, which were my designers. That resonated. Like, they were like, oh, I have this question, and they're actually in here engaging with me, and my colleagues are chatting about this. Like, it made it obvious that you're not in a vacuum. So for us, that's maybe not the only tool we have, but that's the primary tool. And we get support from leadership, encouraging them to participate in these types of things that we offer. But modeling, the short answer is probably modeling.
That's a great point. And did you end up having course content built into that as well, like or the guide as part of the Canvas syllabus and such, or was that more of referring to the external guides and then discussing them in the discussion forums?
Oh no, it was built right into the class. you know, we built out that teaching institute like it was a traditional course. I mean, it was a week-long intensive course, but you know, they would be moving through a Canvas module and arrive at that discussion after doing the reading and then participate just like a student would.
Okay. Heather's reminding me to stop asking my own questions because there's questions in the Q&A pod.
Yes, there are. So, and I spoke longer than I really wanted to. I wanted to give some time for questions.
So are you looking at, if not, I can read them. So from Thatcher, there's a question of, we have an opt-in culture. What's your most successful strategy for promoting good teaching and course design?
That's great. I'm happy to hear that we're not the only ones. So the modeling, like I said, but also in terms of the strategies that we use is we partner with our teaching and learning center, which since I started working on these slides, we're now part of. So my team is now part of the Central Teaching and Learning Center. So again, every culture is a little different, but at Brown, they care about good teaching and learning in the abstract, right? They want to see evidence-based practices, right? Like they want to see research that says this works, right? So what we do is we'll bring in a guest speaker, someone from the Teaching and Learning Center, or one of my designers gives a webinar or a seminar saying, you know, here's evidence and here's what this might look like at Brown. And at the end, there's a plug. Here's the tool that we recommend to do that with. If you want to connect with us, come then. Because we found that if we do workshops, trainings, anything of that nature, everybody tunes out. You know, for us, it's been an opportunity to see that it's possible, but you're still going to end up in a consultation with that instructor to help them integrate it. And we're okay, like we're frankly okay with that. But, you know, we realized pretty early on that walking through it pretty quickly and like, here's how it looks. Here's how you do this thing. Here's how you set it up. The instructor can get that light bulb moment and say, okay, that doesn't seem too hard. I can do that. And then in a month, when they're developing the course for the next semester, they'll remember that and actually sit with us and integrate it. So we, you know, the only trainings we still do are the really core ones on like how to use that template and how to like manage the Canvas gradebook. Like we don't, sort of the wide sweeping, really general stuff is the only thing we still do technology training on, because we do harmonized training or Zoom trainings, and folks would come or not come and tune out or not tune out and then just email us questions anyway. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's been our experience.
There's another question from Jeffrey here that is a little orthogonal, but maybe it was related to the guides portion earlier. Could you share an example of an assessment for evaluating student work, please?
Yes. So,
and also, real quick before
sure.
Violet has asked this twice, it looks like some folks are having to log in to dldbrown.edu.
You shouldn't.
There's a more direct URL, so I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
I found
so
it.
back to Jeffrey's question. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So there's going to be under the course development guide, some of them will have credentials, and I'm, again, sorry about that. There is some that is behind permissions on purpose because it's our IP. We have Creative Commons for most of them, so you can actually reuse them for non-profit reasons, right? Like if you want to use them at your school. But I would encourage you to email me, and I can send you copies. Like I'd be happy to send you copies as fellow educators of any of our guides. It's just some of it's just not open to the public website all the time. But just reach out. I'd be happy to share. And in terms of assessment, you know, I needed to get permission for assessment examples of what it looked like. So the only one I have is the one I shared earlier about pyramids in context, this course. Again, I think it was Jeffrey who asked that question. Feel free to send me a note. I can always jump on a Zoom and give you examples when we're not recording, you know, so that I don't have to worry about any kind of FERPA confidentiality, that kind of thing. I can show you.
Jim, are you okay if I share your email?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, perfect. I'll share that in the chat. Sorry to interrupt.
but this is the only example I have, but I do think it's a good one, you know, where the instructor's leaving comments on the side, but they can see, you know, that the students posted that video assignment there. There are 4 comments. You know, there's 4 comments now. In a screenshot, I couldn't fit them all in, but you're able to scroll down and see the comments that people have responded to this person's video post.
How often are you doing, so there's a couple of questions here, like how often are you doing assessment based on the student work versus assessment based on their participation under those activity totals, or assessment based on how much of the other things they've actually read, you know, to the reviewed part of that screen? Like, are you giving them guidance on that of how's the best way to assess, or do you leave that up to the instructor again to say, you know, here's the tool, here's all the info, do what you will?
It's a bit of both. I know I can speak at least to the Hispanic Studies program that I work very closely with. They had rubrics for discussions already that they were in Canvas, and they had just sort of, you know, on paper submission style Canvas assignments, but they would rubric the WordPress conversations. They've applied that same rubric here in terms of response and participation. Again, for them, the point was the conversation, just to practice language. So they had a pretty clear picture of what they needed to do. For the rest of you know, courses, our recommendation is typically, you know, if it's just a response post, which is the most common one, right? Read this, respond to it. It's typically we'll have 2, you know, you have to respond to at least 2 other people. Anybody who's integrated harmonized, we don't have that problem. I mean, people are pretty chatty, as long as the source material isn't painfully dry and uninteresting. I mean, there's honestly nothing you can do in those cases, which is, again, a coaching moment as a designer to say, maybe this wasn't the reading to have them discuss.
Jeffrey was also asking, well, he's asking, I think, about the tool. Are there tracking tools to show how much students are accessing, reading, editing comments? And the answer is yes, and Harmonize for that. Do you find your instructors are using any of like the version tracking, or do you get any feedback from them around some of the different analytics tools? This is a big area of curiosity for me, is like, what level of analytics do you find your instructors wanting to use about the discussion, and kind of, are we providing the right thing, or are we missing the boat on some things? Are there things you're like, oh, please, this that we haven't done?
Yeah, so as proper academics, I actually, I noticed that the trend is to favor the latest version. And I think as someone who's like, people who are always publishing academic things, they're like, the latest version is the one that I believe in. So the students probably feels the same. Where that is not true is concerns of plagiarism. That's the only time that we hear folks going back to look at revision history, is when they think somebody might have posted someone else's comment or something of that nature.
I should know this, but are you using our plagiarism integration to check those things automatically, or are you letting the instructors figure it out? Like, do you guys have a Turnitin and Unicheck or Erkind or whatever license?
We have Turnitin. I don't know that we've turned it on for Harmonize. I should know that too, but I don't off the top of my head. I think we did. I think I was on a call, an integration call, in terms of setting it up, if memory serves, but I'm not the Canvas admin, so I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to answer this other question too, in terms of where do you think an instructional designer can help most in moving a course online? Be present, like make sure the students know the instructor is present. Like that is our core principle. And they can do that in a lot of ways. One of the examples that our designers have always used is actually pretty low tech. Ask the students to comment on a news item from the week, grab the top 3, record a response to that. You know, it shows the students you're there, you're reading what they send you, you're engaged. Like really the success to this is to stay engaged, you know, beyond a discussion, you know, comment on discussions with frequency and consistency. You know, make announcements based, like, so, you know, if 10 students send you a chat either built into Canvas or whatever tool you're using for chat with a similar question, you don't have to answer them all individually, but you could make an announcement. Hey, a lot of you have had this concern. I hear you. Have consistent office hours. Like the students are willing to forgive a lot in terms of, how crafted the experience is online if you're present and engaging with them, and they get to know who your personality. They understand that you're actually concerned about what they're bringing to you. Like it's a game changer in online experiences.
Hey, Jim, I know you're not using our chat feature yet because it's relatively new, but Thatcher has a question here about some of our teachers are afraid of students using chat and Harmonize, perhaps because of backtalk, distraction, side conversations.
Yep.
Do you have experiences with this, or you aren't using our chat tool yet, but do you have worries about that? I guess I'll rephrase the question that way.
Well, we are using a chat tool though, so I think the concerns are the same, and yes, we have those concerns. So one of the things is they're going to do it anyway, right? And I know that there's plenty of baggage in this space in terms of talking about it, but it's been our experience that if you provide them with a chat channel that is part of the course, at least you've got eyes on it, right? We know that the students, if we don't give them one, they're just going to make one anyway. Just as an example, I get sales reach outs from all the common chat platforms like, hey, 6,000 people are using this on your campus. You should really buy it instead of using the free version. And we realize it's because the students just set it up anyway, right? So if I have a 200 enrollment chemistry course, one student always puts their hand up and says, oh, I've made a chat channel here. You should all join, and sends it only to the other students, right? So for us, we wanted to pick something that was actually part of the course environment because we wanted it to be able to, like, maybe not moderate, but at least you're aware of it, right? If you give them sort of an official forum for that, at least they're doing it within the confines of Canvas or Harmonize or whatever you pick. So it's always a challenge, but especially in remote, they're going to do it anyway. It's the equivalent of them trying to pretend like they're looking at their phone under the desk. So they're going to be texting their friends anyway. So if you give them a channel that's part of the course, you can redirect that energy, at least so it's part of what's happening inside the environment. The other big one for us too is identity. We don't want students doing it in Facebook or any other platform that they do, because they can pretend to be whoever they want. At a very minimum for us, if they're using a tool that we've purchased and adopted, they're speaking as them, right? It's integrated into our identity management system. There's some level of oversight involved, and it means that students don't have to give out their personal credentials, because this always often happens too. People are like, oh, let's join this Google group to talk about the course or whatever. Well, then they've got their actual, Gmail address or something, and they could, that might be a little more than they want to give away, right? Whereas if you use something that's built in, they're credentialed in such a way that, and the experience is sandboxed, that they can chat with each other within the confines of Canvas in sort of a safer space, and it separates out the personal side. We're at time, I think.
We are. I don't actually have any other questions, so that may be perfect. Heather, did I miss any?
I have it open. I don't see any other open questions, and as I'm sure is true for a lot of the other folks on this call, I have a 1 o'clock meeting that I'll need to run to.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jim. Thanks everybody for attending. We have a couple more webinars coming up. If you want to check out the webinar section of our website, you can do so. Jim, if you can jump forward a couple slides, show them real quick, and then we can take off. Have a great conversation with Sherry Prupis talking about transformative learning and sort of how to get the social emotional side into the classroom. And then with the head of USDLA, best practices for online discussions, Rhonda Blackburn's going to do a webinar with us to get her word out. So, and you can check those out on the webinar section. Heather put it in the chat. On to your next meeting, everyone. Thank you.